Well, welcome everybody, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us for our live event. My name is Mark Hudson, CEO of Squirrel365, and today I'm joined by Paul Grill, CEO of InfoSol, and Donald McCormick, Chief Strategy Officer of Squirrel365. Now, at the moment, all attendees are in listen-only mode. We're actually streaming this event live on YouTube and here on the Zoom webinar platform. This live event is going to be recorded and will be available to you all later today. And we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So I encourage you all to use the Q&A and chat panels here on Zoom webinar, or if you're on YouTube, on the question panel in YouTube as well. So we can collect these questions and my colleagues can respond to them later in the session. Okay, so let's get started. Now, InfoBurst has helped organizations all over the globe to deliver timely, accurate, and actionable information to the right people at the right time. It's enabled organizations to maximize use of their business intelligence solutions and licenses, and has really helped drive a high return on investment. Today, we're going to focus on the value InfoBurst delivers when partnered with Squirrel365. So let's see how we do that. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome everybody. Of course, I'm super excited today because these are my two favorite products, InfoBurst and Squirrel, and I get to have a few minutes talking about them, and then I'm going to hand over to Donald, who's going to show you some just totally amazing case studies and also a demo of how the two solutions work in practice. Now, of course, Squirrel365 is this super amazing no-code application dashboard, value calculator, creation tool. And it is totally and utterly amazing, as you will see. InfoBurst Dash has been around for many years and is a component of the InfoBurst product. And it allows you to be able to create an in-memory data cache that you can put lots and lots of information into, in addition to a set of very, very powerful connectors that allow you to connect to databases, right back to databases. The cache itself is really interesting in the sense that what you can do with this cache is you can run queries, say, from BusinessObjects, or just from other databases, or even from Excel, and you can load data into this in-memory cache automatically in the background. So you can have these data sources coming in into this in-memory data cache. Then from Squirrel, you can directly access the data cache. Now you can just access it like an in-memory repository, but you can also do SQL statements against it so that you can only pull back what you need when you need it into different components in your Squirrel dashboard, which is just incredible. So all of this to say that it's a pretty amazing tool. So here is just a quick slide to show you what's really happening out there. That here's your Squirrel dashboard on the left-hand side. And if I click, say, on Americas, because I just want to bring back only the data for, cities in Americas, right? I can click on Americas on my dashboard, and it will launch, right, this query against the cache and only bring back that set of data. So instead of bringing back thousands and thousands of rows, it just brings back the 50 or 60 rows that you need at that point in time. So an incredibly, powerful capability here. And the cache itself can be refreshed based on time or based on event. So only when the data in the database has changed do I want to automatically refresh the cache. And InfoBurst Dash takes care of that in the background, giving you, potentially hundreds of thousands, millions of rows of data sitting in memory that you can quickly, retrieve directly in your Squirrel dashboard. The other really powerful thing about the connectors with InfoBurst Dash is this ability to do direct database query connectors and go to any ODBC compliant database, and also to write back which gives you another, right, totally amazing option that from your Squirrel dashboard, you can be writing back data to any ODBC compliant database. So with that said, I want to hand over to Donald now, who's going to talk about a couple of really interesting case studies using Squirrel with InfoBurst Dash, and then take you through a demo as well. So over to you, Donald.
Thank you very much, Paul. Let me just share my screen here. So, yes, as Paul said, what we're going to do is we're going to show you two examples of what people have done with this Squirrel 365 and InfoBurst combination. But the rest, after that first couple of minutes, the rest of the session will be in the tools themselves, showing you how this all hangs together and how easy it is to do the sort of things that these two customers have done. So if I have here, the first is Salesforce. So Salesforce created a business value calculator and delivered it with Squirrel 365 and InfoBurst. And this is just the highlight, 1 minute of highlights that I'll play you from a 30-minute interview that I did with Ziv Bersili, who's the guy who wrote all of this at Salesforce, using Squirrel and InfoBurst. And if you go to squirrel365.io, our events page has that full interview if you're interested in it. But if we look here at what's going on, so it looks like a standard dashboard, but it's many other features. For example, he's written a whole menuing system where you can click on things, click down the side, see different things changing. You can have in-app configurations, so the users can turn off features and turn on features in terms of which aspects of the ROI are to be used. They can put in their own numbers in order for those to be used in the calculations. There's a chart here where you select on the chart and it gives you different information underneath it. You've got different ways of selecting data. You've got the drop downs, and these are actually driving numbers into an Amazon Web Services cost of ownership calculator. This is running various assumptions in terms of the various ROI levers, and you can set them to max and average. And then you can do interactive modeling. So you can say, well, what happens if it's a 5-year benefit? What happens if I want to run it out over 12 years? And you can see everything comes up. You can have like save scenarios back to the database that uses the write back that Paul was talking about there. And finally, it's got embedded dashboards, and these dashboards are used by Salesforce customers to present back to their management as to why it is that they should be able to do it. And all of that's written using Squirrel and InfoBurst. Everything you saw on those screens, none of that was anything other than Squirrel on the front end and InfoBurst at the back end, and done with clicks, not code. Clicks, not code. And so then the next one is USPI run a set of medical facilities, and they had to get a COVID-19 dashboard up to manage supplies and medication and thing, and they had a very short order to do it. Again, they turned to Squirrel 365 and InfoBurst to do it, and managed to deliver what you're about to see in only 3 weeks. And so there's the overview of that, and this is again from an interview you can see on our website from David Baer, who's up in the top right-hand corner. So this is a dashboard. You can filter it, so filter down to particular people and particular facilities. You can drill through, so click on any number and see the details underneath it. So you want to know about surgical gowns, you can click there and see what's happening, where they are across the various of the estate. Click, and this internet click to change it. So one click up here, just one click changes the whole view from specific to non-specific, so you can start to see different things very quickly and easily. And as I say, that dashboard was done start to finish in only 3 weeks using InfoBurst. And let's come out of there. Sorry, we'll go back. There we go. And so that was done in just 3 weeks from start to finish. And again, if you go on the squirrel365.io website, you will find the events page, and you can see the half-hour conversation I had with David about that and how he did it in 3 weeks. And there was really some great plumbing underneath, and it all culminated in InfoBurst delivering information up to Squirrel. So those are truly remarkable. I mean, it's always great when you're involved with a product to see what customers do with it, particularly when they do things you wouldn't have imagined were possible. And Ziv's dashboard's definitely up, or Ziv's project's definitely up in those. And the fact that David did his start to finish in 3 weeks is also quite remarkable. So what we're going to do now is look at the product itself and show you how it comes together, how Squirrel and InfoBurst come together, and so how you can do it and how easy it is to do this, because not only is this possible, not only is it sort of powerful, but it's really straightforward to do in such a way that it really drives down the cost of ownership compared to other sort of BI solutions. This is really easy to implement and get up and running. So the first demo I'm going to do is to start with a demo of a dashboard, and this is again a dashboard that's created in Squirrel sitting on top of InfoBurst. So if I come in and preview this, we'll see the facilities that are available in this dashboard. So I can choose a time period to see data in. So I think so there, and it fills up my data here. I can choose another time period. So that's the filtering you saw from David's dashboard. I can change my view. So this is a very simple version of what Ziv was doing in terms of switching things on and off and being able to change the UI. I can actually export data out to Excel if I want. I can come here and move this to change the assumptions, and that's the same as Ziv was doing to change the assumptions in his business case. And even up here, I can come in and write comments in. So here is a new comment. So I come in and click that and then add that and see it's added in here, and that persists. So I close my comments, that new comment is still there, it's added, it's actually saved. That's using that write back capability that Paul was talking about through InfoBurst back to the underlying database. So this is, and so what happens, you take this, you run all this together in Squirrel sitting on top of InfoBurst, and then you can publish it. You can publish these out to our cloud, and they're instantly available. You get a link you can send to anyone who can see it, or you can publish them locally as a web app that you can then host on your web server if you want to keep it in-house. So you can deploy it in our cloud or on-premise using the web app. And from an end user point of view, all they see is this interface, or the interface that David had or Ziv had in their projects. But under the scenes, behind the scenes, rather, under the covers, what's going on is that Squirrel is talking in the background through the spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet is key, and we'll see exactly how that works in a minute, is key to the way that Squirrel functions. And so what you can see here is I'm on my units page. So in here, I've got two connections, units and journeys, back to the underlying InfoBurst database. And we'll, again, later on, we'll look at wiring those up and actually how you go about that. But those two, when I load this dashboard, so I can load it in debug mode. The preview you saw before is how the end user would see it, but I can do it in debug mode so that the designer can have a look at what's going on under the covers. So if I click on that, you'll notice here, it happens very quickly, but that's come out of the database. So go back to design. This spreadsheet actually has no data in it here, but if I click on debug, this fills with data, and that's running a query and filling the spreadsheet full of data, and that spreadsheet is in turn, when I come and click on these and I select a time period, is filling this with data. So it comes from InfoBurst into the spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet then distributes it out to the components. Obviously, when I preview it as an end user, I don't see the spreadsheet, that's all wrapped up, but it's that spreadsheet logic that's combining all of these together, and where a lot of the power of this comes from. So what I thought I'd do is just give you a quick idea of how Squirrel works from the ground up. And all you're going to see, I'm going to take you through some steps here, and by the end of the next 10 or 15 minutes, you will have seen every technique, every requirement you would have to build exactly what David and Ziv both built. There's nothing more to it. There's nothing more complicated. It is all, as we say, clicks, not code, based on the spreadsheet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet is going to be my new regional sales spreadsheet. And I created this in Excel. I could have created it in Google Sheets, and it's a nuts and bolts Excel spreadsheet. So what I've got here is some data. So this data gives me Q1 product sales for regions by product. There's a classic set of data. There's nothing here. This is just data. And then I've got a little table here which uses Excel formulas. So here it says if that cell is north, then pick C1, which is the north quarter one, it's at the north value. If it's south, then pick the south value, and if it's east, pick the east value, and otherwise pick the west value. So that's just picking values out of this. This does the same to pick these down there. So that's four nested if statements, a sum. Sums down the bottom and up here, and then these cells just grow at a rate, combined overall growth rate, which gives a total overall growth plus differential growth rates for fruit. You will see this in spreadsheets up and down the country, around the world. It's all very straightforward. So what we can do in Squirrel is to take these spreadsheets and then turn them into the sort of thing you've just seen. So for example, I've got this data down here. Maybe I want to add a chart. So I'm going to add a column chart here which is going to visualize the data in that table. So my sales by quarter for different different products. So I could type my main title in here, but the real power comes when I start binding into the spreadsheet. So I connect it up to the data in the spreadsheets that's saying quarterly sales is in there. I sort of say I don't want a subtitle, and then I can bind I'll close the general tab up. I can bind my data. So I'm going to bind this data from here. So just this set of data there, which is fruit and vegetables, household meals over Q1 to Q4. And immediately that gives me this here. I don't want it that way. I want Q1 to Q4 along the bottom. So I just switch the data layout, and hey presto, I have my chart. Now there's all sorts of other formatting options I can take on here. Let's see, for example, I can come down here and maybe on my y-axis, I'm going to do a manual scale that goes up to, say, 500 like that. So I can do see the growth when it comes in. I might also want to add a table here, so I can add a nice little data table which will inherit the formatting from my underlying Excel sheet. There we go. So very quick. Actually, I'll turn off the spreadsheet line so I get that. So there we go. So very quickly, I've got that data there, and so it's nice visual representation of what's in the spreadsheet. But the really interesting is what the magic happens when I start to also interact with the spreadsheet through components on the canvas here. So for example, if I take a slider, this slider is now going to come in here, and I'm going to wire it up to the overall growth rate. So that will now control it's at 12% because it's 12 there. But when I run this, I'll be able to slide this, and that will change the data in there, which will then change all these numbers there, which will in turn change these two visualizations there. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste this into a second one, and I'm going to bind that second one into the growth rate just for fruit. So now that I've done that, I can come in here and preview. So this is what the end user would see. They've got the graph and the table. But if I change this, immediately things are happening. You see all the numbers changing based on the model in my Excel spreadsheet. Or if I do this, it's just the fruit that was growing there. So I'm moving that. So these are, and I've literally built this in front of you. It's really sort of remarkable what you can do and how quickly you can do it by taking the spreadsheet modeling and embodying it inside the visualizations and interactive controls inside Squirrel. And some of the modeling that you saw in Ziv's dashboard, using his business calculator, is based in exactly this way. There's nothing else going on. You have got an Excel model. You can just use that Excel model to drive these sort of things. Now, what we can do now is we say, well, actually, remember here, so if I type south in here, well, if I could type, so UTH, then all the numbers have changed to south. So what we want is some way to change that to south as we're interacting with it as a finished project. So what I'm going to do here is add a drop down, and that drop down is going to get its values again from the sheet, just these 4 regions there. And then what I'm going to say is that it's going to push back into the spreadsheet the label that the user selects, and it's going to push that back into this cell here. And that's all I need to do. So now I've got something that will change the numbers in here depending on what it is that yes, that's 500 scales a bit much for the Western numbers, which are in the thousands. So I'd have to fix that. But sort of I've now got, and you can start to see the sort of things that in those amazing dashboards and applications that I showed you to start with, you can start to see how this all comes together. And remember, I've built this just by chatting to you and pulling it all together based on a spreadsheet. There's nothing complicated. It's really quick and easy to do. So that's when you've got sort of a model in the spreadsheet that you're doing it, but there's another interesting way you can do this in Squirrel. So I'm going to import a second different one here, which will get us more onto this the InfoBurst connectivity. So what I'm going to do is, this is a set of data. There are no formulas in here. It's just a set of data. But this time what I'm going to do, again, let's just visualize it quickly in a table because we can see all the, and there are just many different visualizations you've got here, charts, sort of different visualizations, tables. You've got lots of different controls. You can add images and things like that. So there's a huge range of capability here that we're only really just scratching the surface on. And so having visualized this table, what I want to do is be able to fill this table, this currently with north data, with the north, south, east, and west. So again, I'm going to add a drop down in here, but this time, rather than using based on formulas in the spreadsheet, I'm going to say I'm going to drive it from just the data in the spreadsheet. It's going to give me a choice of those regions there in it. And then I'm going to say when I'm using the drop down to move data, and I'm going to filter the rows, and I'm going to take the source, which is this set of data here, and that just this drop down box is then going to filter it into this set of data here. And that's all I need to do. And so now if I come in here and I select, you'll see that the numbers change. And this can be much more, rather than using many spreadsheet formulas to achieve the effect, this can be much more efficient to be able to do that. And notice again, the spreadsheet is changing as I do this. So I go into debug mode. When I change between these, I get these sort of things happening in the spreadsheet as well, because this is just a reflection of what's happening in the spreadsheet. But remember again, when you deliver this, when I've exported it out to the cloud or locally, the user doesn't see anything. They just see interactivity and the ability to see this data in there. But then I said we get to InfoBurst. So we're going to look at how you get data out of InfoBurst. So for example, let's say I didn't have that data in there. So maybe that data is sitting in the database. So how difficult, or actually how easy is it to get that from the database? Well, I'm just going to come in here and add a connector. Now there are many connectors, and as Paul said, there are different ways of getting data out of InfoBurst. There's the cache and the cache query, and there's the database query, and then there's the write back that drove those comments that we saw before, the comment write back. I'm going to use a query that's going to go against a piece of SQL that's already been defined in InfoBurst, and we'll look at how you define that a little later. So I'm going to say I want to add in, if I can find it, where's my, there we go, that's my my InfoBurst URL, and give it logon credentials. So I'm now connected, and I can choose the database that I want to go to, and I'm going to buy InfoBurst demo. And then I can choose the query that I want, which is just regional products, which is actually just a table which simulates, it just has the data that you saw that I deleted out of the Squirrel spreadsheet there. And I'm going to say I want to include that, and I'm going to write that into this range here. And I've already got headers in here, so I'm not going to pull the headers. And that's it. So this, when I run this, if you'll notice when I hit debug, watch this space down here, that will fill with the data. That's run a query in InfoBurst, pulled it back and pulled it into Squirrel. So now when I come in here, and you notice that's a one-off query, and now what's happening is this drop down is doing the filtering from here to here. So I get one query at load, and then it's pulling it back here and backwards and forwards, and I can so I'm doing the query to get the data in, and then I'm doing the manipulation inside the Squirrel model, inside the dashboard itself. And again, the end user doesn't see any of the underlying sort of spreadsheet or any of the underlying data coming in. They just see the numbers that they need to see in order to be able to get what they need out of this. So that's the most basic thing you can do, is you bring data into, and even that is remarkably effective. So you've got a big set of data, you want to bring it in, build a dashboard on top of it, lots of interactivity, just doing it point and click with the Squirrel components, you can do that. But actually, we're going to, the real power of this comes from the 1-2 integrated combination of Squirrel and InfoBurst together. So it's not just a case of reading data out of InfoBurst. We can have a two-way conversation between Squirrel and InfoBurst, which really takes this to the next level. So I'm going to start again with something else, but in order to look at this, we're going to have to go and look at something that we've got in InfoBurst. So I will log into my InfoBurst here, and it's this InfoBurst demo database that you saw before. And I've got a number of, there's two, well actually the data, let's show you the data set. So I've got this retail sales table, and if I select star from it, then it's just a it's a sort of 10,000 row table, very straightforward set of data. Now, what I'm going to do is focus on two queries out of this. The first one is a distinct. It just says, select distinct column from retail sales. Now, the only thing you have to know about this is that in InfoBurst, putting an @ symbol before a name means that makes it a parameter. So when I run this, it'll ask me for a parameter and so if I say I want the lines in here, or is it line or lines? It's line. So that gives me all the distinct set of lines. Whereas if I run it with quarter, then it'll give me all the quarters. So that's just being able to parameterize that query there. And the second one is quarterly sales, which is doing select quarter, sum of revenue, sum of margin, sum of quantity from retail sales, same table. Again, where line is equal to a parameter line, so that will be an input grouped by quarter. So again, if I run in here and it's asking me for this, so accessories, if I run that, that's now giving me the Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 revenue, margin, and quantity added up for accessories. So those are the queries that I've defined in InfoBurst, very straightforward. And the one you saw before, the simple one you saw before, was regional products, which really just did a select from the table. So you can do some really powerful things with some very simple queries here. So I've got all of those there. So if I go back to Squirrel here, what I'm going to do is to start connecting up those queries. So I'm going to add in a query here, and again, I'm going to connect to my InfoBurst system, go to the InfoBurst database, and I'm going to start with the distinct one. And I'm going to take the distinct one and I'm going to put it here, and I'm just going to bring back information into there. And you see, because it's got a parameter, it says which column do you want. So it's all wired up. So there's a two-way integration between InfoBurst. So if I say line there and I run it, then I get a list of lines. If I was to go back to this and say I want quarters, quarter like that, then I get a list of quarters. So you can see this backwards and forwards already happening. It happens here that line is what I want, so I want those lines in there. So now what I can do is I can add a drop down, as I did before. I'm going to add a drop down, and now I'm going to add that drop down. I'm going to say I'm going to drive it from these cells. So what's going to happen is I'm going to log on, I'm going to run the project. It will fill this with that from the database, and then those fields will fill that. So I'll have a dynamic set here of those are coming from the database. So this is a dynamic selector being driven from the database. No work on my part really to do it. I just connected these two up, and I've got that. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to add a second one here, and that second one again is going to be here, and admin. No, I've misspelled that. There we go, again from the InfoBurst database, but this time I'm going to go for quarterly sales, and the destination is I'm going to put it in those cells here. And again, I need a line, so I'm going to sort of have a line in here, which is, I'll make sure I know where it is, I'll put it in yellow, and that's going to be accessories. So now if I run this, now I've got to bind, I've got to tell it as accessory, so I bind this line into this in the sheet. Oh, that one there. And then if I do that, so that's this for accessories. What I might want to do is put these titles in here. Quarter, revenue, margin, and quantity. And then I just have to change this, what I'm bound here to. So rather than binding over those, I'll just bind to the 4 rows and say I don't want the headers, just so I can see what's good, don't include the headers. So now when I debug, see I get those numbers in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, actually, I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to put a table on here that's going to visualize that, so I can get it into my dashboard. So that goes there like that. So now when I run it, you'll see the numbers come into my table there. Turn off these here, and then I'm going to wire this up so that rather than this having to be typed in, so I could type in something else there and it would give me another one. I'm going to say when I select this, I'm going to put the label from here, and I'm going to put it into this field here. So now I've got like a two-way back and forward communication. So when I run this, when I say I want city, and one other thing I have to do, I have to say this query, the second query, which is getting the quarterly sales. Rather than refreshing it when I load the dashboard, I'm going to refresh it based on the change of this cell here. So when the user selects, so first of all, all these come in from there. The user selects that. I click on it. It changes this, which then updates this query. So this query now does that. So if I come in here, I can now say, oh, there we go. So now what we're doing is we're seeing those numbers come in. And so this is being populated from the database. When I click this, it's changing that cell, which is changing this. So everything there is going on. But then the real power of this comes from the power layered upon power. So not only am I getting data, I'm writing back to the database, I'm getting data from the database and then parameterizing queries. But the final thing I can do here is to use the spreadsheet as a way of changing data. So now what I've got here is if I come and do this, then I've got this data in here, and that is quarters down the side and revenue along the top. What happens if I wanted it the other way around, quarters along the top and revenue and margin and quantity down the side? Well, in a query, that would be really quite hard to do. But here what I can do is I can just say Q1, Q2, Q2, Q3, Q4. If I could type properly, Q4. And then I can say revenue, margin, and quantity. So this is where the power of the InfoBurst plus the power of Squirrel come together. So I just say Q1 revenue is going to be there because the quarters are down the side. Q2 revenue is just that one there. and Q3 revenue is that one there, and Q4 revenue is that one there. And I can do the same for margin. So that equals margin in Q, sorry, if I do equals, that equals margin in Q1, that equals margin in Q2, that equals margin in Q3, and that equals margin in Q4. And I would do the same for quantity. Now what I've got, so I can get rid of this table here and add a new table and bind that into this. So something that would have been really quite difficult in, if I click on these, if something that would have been quite difficult to, or really quite difficult to do in a query. In fact, I'm not sure I could write the query that could do that, but I've done it simply just by using simple formulas in Excel. So you can bring the data in, manipulate it, have the drop down, populate the queries, bring them back in, and and then manipulate it inside the spreadsheet. This is why this is so quick and easy to do. You don't have to, there are no difficult, complex skills you have to master in order to do this. It's all just sort of there in your hands through the data coming out of InfoBurst and the query layer in the Excel layer, the spreadsheet layer in Squirrel. And remember that the Salesforce dashboard that you saw and the USPI dashboard that you saw, everything in them was done with techniques like you've just seen. There is nothing else to learn. Just using InfoBurst, Squirrel connectivity, and the spreadsheet capability inside Squirrel with its components on the canvas, you can do all of this without any other skills, and certainly without any coding whatsoever. So with that, we're just about up against time. So I will pop over the summary and I will hand back to Mark to marshal any questions that have come in as we have been going through.
Thanks, Donald. Excellent presentation, and thank you, Paul, as well. We have had some questions come in. I'm going to start with, I think it's a question for you, Donald, and that is, in Squirrel, is there a limit to the size and row of data? And that's from Rena.
So it's a good question. It's a hard one to answer. So in theory, well, not in theory, there's no specific limit. So it won't say, sorry, you've got 500 rows, you can't go any further. But obviously, as you load more data in and more formulas in the spreadsheet, then it will take more and more memory, more and more processing power. And so there are practical limits based on sort of what is available on the end user's machine to process it. But that's the beauty of where what Paul was talking about, InfoBurst comes in, because with what you have just seen, so what I was doing there is when I picked a line, so I picked accessories, it was going back. So that's a 10,000 row table, but I was only ever bringing back about 20 rows of data from the database. And so the database, or indeed the XDC cache, is doing the work. The end user doesn't know it; they're just getting data. But the work has been done in the appropriate place. So you can scale up to huge amounts of data just by bringing the right bit into the dashboard at the right time, based on this sort of 1-2 combination of Squirrel, its components, the spreadsheet, and the InfoBurst queries.
Great stuff. Thank you. So yeah, absolutely letting InfoBurst do the heavy lifting for you there. A question for Paul, and really about InfoBurst, comes from David. Can InfoBurst support cross data sources within an InfoBurst query, Paul?
Yes, the best way to do that is to use the cache as we described, and so therefore you could pull in different data sources. But Squirrel is only accessing the cache, so it can then pull data from all those different data sources through the cache. That's by far the most efficient way to do it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that, Paul. We had another one from David, and Donald. He asked a question, and he cancelled it because you immediately showed how easy it was to define parameters in an InfoBurst query. So thank you for that. But he did ask: Is there such a thing as a development non-production license for InfoBurst that people can use, Paul?
Well, InfoBurst is a server-based product, and it comes with a free test dev server-based license per se. We're always willing to work with individuals who want to try things out using it, but it doesn't. The licensing model is not per user. It's an unlimited server-based license model.
Okay. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Question for you, Donald, coming in from Sanjay here on the Zoom webinar, is asking, is there any plan to bring mapping elements into the Squirrel software?
So absolutely, there are no maps in no maps built specifically into Squirrel today. It's one of the things that's high on our list of things that we want to do. In fact, we had a sort of survey last year of the things that typically people want to do, and the results from that were interesting. So we've got sort of lined up what it is that we want to do. Having said that, I did some work for a customer recently where they wanted some maps embedded, and we did it using sort of an external component wired up to Squirrel. So it is possible to do it today with an external, a little external work, but we are going to be adding it in the future, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. I know we are pushed for time, and I appreciate you all are staying on, so I really thank you for that. Let's take one more question. It came as you were showing some of the Excel capabilities with inside Squirrel, Donald, and the question was, how many Excel functions does Squirrel support today?
So Squirrel supports over 400 Excel spreadsheet functions. I think Excel itself has like 750 or something like that. So we support just over half of them, but the ones that we support cover 99% of what people normally use. I mean, most of the others are sort of like really deep stats or really deep engineering, and sort of, if there are things that people want, we're always adding more. But we have sort of, so all the classic ones that you would want, VLOOKUP, index, sort of all that sort of stuff is in there, as well as the sort of sum and the one in text and the ones you would expect. So we've got a great coverage of the most used functions. I would say about 99% of functions that people use routinely are all covered within Squirrel.
Okay, and just one final question for you, Paul. I think a quick question. What business intelligence systems does InfoBurst support? You mentioned that in your intro.
Yes, I mean, we obviously support business objects. So again, you can push data directly from business objects into the InfoBurst Dash data cache, the XML data cache. But we can also, support any kind of database query to an ODBC compliant database, and that can be pushed into the cache as well. And Excel can be pushed into the cache too. So, we've had people with other BI systems as well, where they wanted to get the data out of the BI systems into the cache, and they've done it by using either a direct database connection to the cache, or exporting to Excel and putting it in the cache. So we support that as well. InfoBurst itself natively supports business objects and Tableau and Microsoft reporting services.
Great,
Of course,
fantastic.
Crystal reports and Webby is the key things in BO.
Thank you, Paul. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you both. Donald, a fantastic presentation and demonstration as always. I thank you all for joining us today, both here on Zoom and also for those who are watching on YouTube. And thank you all for staying around as well. I know we've stolen 7 minutes of your hour, so thank you for that. If you do have any questions that we haven't answered today, then please feel free to reach out to InfoSol guys over at infosol.com. You'll find the details on there. Or if there's a question about Squirrel, you can contact us here at Squirrel365.io. We'll be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you all very much for your day, and good evening.